ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for Felicia. Felicia, the floor is yours. You're most welcome, and please take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ndengwa, and everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to this webinar. I'm actually excited anytime I get the opportunity to, share knowledge in my area, or even if it's something that I have knowledge about. I'm always excited because I think the more you share, the more you also propagate knowledge amongst professionals and, generally among the human race. So I'm really happy to share with you on this topic in adapting in uncertain times. I promise I'm not going to be boring. I'm going to be projecting a slide, but I'm also going to be giving you some perspectives based on my main experience that, I've also had during this COVID time in managing within our organization as well. I've also been sent a few questions, which I believe came from some of the members. So right after the presentation, I'll delve into the questions, and if there are any other follow-up questions, we'll have the opportunity to look at that. Thank you. So as the topic says, HR in the wake of the new normal, adapting in uncertain times. I think that, with the onset of the coronavirus, it has really woken up the world and brought us new perspective into how businesses are now supposed to go, how businesses are supposed to manage themselves. And I can say that probably about, let's say, more than 50% of organizations didn't even have a business continuity plan or didn't even know what it was about until the onset of this coronavirus. So it has really brought a lot of perspectives on how businesses should channel themselves, how they should behave going forward, because today it's coronavirus, which took everyone by surprise, but it could be something else tomorrow. I mean, God forbid, certain things we can't, have control over. But as I said, today it's coronavirus, but it has opened up our perspective in terms of organizations on how to organize yourself. Should you have any, unforeseen events that would affect the organization? Because when these things happen, it does put a stop, it can put a stop to the whole operations of the organization. So in the foregoing, we are going to look at how crisis plays out, within an organization when it happens. Typically, what I've observed is that, a crisis plays out over 3 phases within an organization. There's the stage when the crisis happens and everyone is running helter-skelter. That's the reaction stage. And then you have the rebound or the recovery stage, where organizations are trying to put themselves together in terms of trying to find out what works best for the organization, what doesn't work best. And then the third phase is thriving in the midst of the crisis, because whatever happens, the crisis has happened and you don't have much control over it. So you would have to find ways and means to ensure that the organization is actually, continuing in its operations. So those are the 3 phases that I've, typically observed within organizations. Now I'll have a look at them, one after the other, so you can understand the perspective from where I'm coming from. In the reaction to crisis, this is where organizations deal with present situations and manages continuity. In this time when there are crises, resilient leaders, are defined by certain traits and characteristics which distinguish them, from surviving and thriving. I say that, surviving is different from thriving, because giving an analogy, you can realize that plants grow in certain plants grow in different climates. So for example, in Ghana here, we don't have the right climate to grow strawberries. In the same instance, I'm sure that the UK doesn't have the right climate to grow cocoa. So in that saying, you can grow strawberries here, they will survive, but they will not thrive because they will not give as much fruit as they are supposed to because it doesn't have the right environment to thrive. In the same way, the cocoa cannot, it probably would grow, but it would not yield as much as it would have yielded if it had the right environment. So this is what I'm talking about when I say that, organizations have the ability to thrive when there's crisis. And this can only happen when the right environment and then the right atmosphere is created within the organization for it to properly take out its operation. Now, also, resilient leaders need to take specific actions and evaluate them in the context of their business. When a crisis comes, you need to check, your geographic location, the type of your operation, your sector, and how, it affects it. Now, I'll use our power plant as an example. When this whole pandemic came, we consider ourselves as an essential services provider because, as Dr. Mwenga said, we produce 15% of the nation's electricity. And can you imagine if we have, God forbid, the pandemic was so bad, we have to shut our plant? That is going to have an utmost, effect within the organization. So when the pandemic happened, we had to look, around us to see our geographical location to check. Is we are located in Takoradi. How has the virus affected our geographical location? And we also looked at our operations as well. Should it happen that everyone is affected, how are we going to is this business going to survive? Because we have an obligation to the government that we have to produce a certain power at a certain time. So these are some of the questions that resilient leaders need to think about when you are in the midst of crisis. You have to look at how the crisis is affecting your location and also the type of business and also your sector as well. Finally, you also need to learn and look at experiences from crisis conditions, which you can leverage on to manage the responses. Moving forward, after reacting to the crisis, then
Madam Felicia, sorry to cut you short. I don't know, is there possibility of increasing the fonts a bit?
Yes.
Are you able to increase your font size a bit so that we can be able to read through the slides? If not possible, then we just, that looks better.
That looks better.
No, if you could make it bigger than that. If possible, thank you. Sorry, yeah.
Is that better?
Yes, that's better, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so moving on, we'll also look at rebounding from the crisis, that's the recovery stage. So at this period, this is where organization learns from events of the crisis, and emerges stronger. And talking about resilient leaders, also in the recovery process, you don't see it as a one-off event because recovery doesn't just happen overnight. It takes time. It's a journey that involves a lot of different steps that needs to be taken. So leaders need to see it as a journey and not as a one-off event that would happen. So it's a continuous process. In the foregoing, I've looked at 5 imperatives within the rebound to guide the business through to the next stage of thriving. Leaders must understand the required mindset shift. When events happen, I think that you need to have a mindset shift so that you can properly roll along with what is happening and have proper thoughts on how to manage the situation. So you don't have to think as if you are in the normal times. You have to have a mindset shift and think about how you're going to move forward, in going forward. You also have to identify and navigate your uncertainties and implications. You have to embed trust as a catalyst to recovery. You have to define the destination and launch a recovery playbook. Now, in listing out all these things that resilient leaders need to do, it involves people, because if you are a business and you don't embed trust at a time when there's crisis, you don't have an HR who is resilient, who would be able to lay out the right outcome or the right things for the employees to do to be able to, follow through the crisis, then, you're bound to fail. So these are some of the things that I have identified, that not just HR leaders. I'm glad that in the introduction, it was mentioned that now, HR is not just sitting with HR. All managers in departments have now become business partners, because from experience, we realize that, you may have policies, you may have things to implement within the organization from the HR context, but if you don't have the managers on board properly, it becomes very difficult for you to have your implementation. One last thing I would like to talk about from the rebound from crisis is to learn from others' successes. Now, for myself, and I guess for everyone as well, coronavirus is new. It took the whole world by surprise, and I don't think any organization had an idea of, or there has been, let me say, a rehearsal on how organizations should organize themselves in the midst of this crisis. Because even as we have it now, organizations still need to learn, because the virus keeps changing in its form and how it's becoming. So for myself as a professional as well, learning from other similar organizations, because at the time, for example, let's say our operations, we didn't know whether we should have people on site, because the nature of our operations, we have about, let me say 80% of our engineers, we have an estate where they live. And then about 20% of the non-core staff, the supporting staff, most of us live, in the Takoradi town. So for us as well, we were thinking, okay, do we do a lockdown for the critical staff, that's those in the colonies? So now we have to learn from other organizations and from other peer organizations in India. How are you managing this situation? Because, they are also in the same, so it's about learning from each other. And when you are in the middle of a crisis, you need to seek knowledge from other places, because that is where you can also learn how people are managing their things and also learn from them. Okay, so moving on, in the third, which is thriving in the midst of crisis, at this stage, organizations prepare for its next normal, whatever it's going to look like. And it's helpful to think of this as a recovery and thriving process, which provides an array and a lot of options, because no one knew what the next normal would be. Because during the pandemic, a lot of businesses you have businesses scaling up, some scaling down, some shutting down. So, the future was really blurry for a lot of organizations and leaders as well. So the thriving stage is a stage where organizations, prepare and shape its next normal. Also, some options for organizations during this phases, as I've said, was that, some expanded, some even changed, their mode of operation. So for example, there is this alcohol brewery in Ghana here. during the pandemic, I don't know about Kenya, but in Ghana here, all of a sudden there was a shortage of sanitation, sanitary items like hand sanitizers, antibacterial disinfectants, and things like that. You had sanitizers that were selling for probably 1 cedi. Now, the price hike, it went up to like 10 cedis. So there is an alcoholic company here in Ghana which took advantage of what is happening because now no importations were also coming. So what they did was they shut one aspect of the plant because now there's a lockdown. They are producing alcohol for people to drink. Now no one is going to the beer bars. People are not even going for shopping because people are in their homes. So in taking advantage, they scaled up and changed their business operation to manufacturing hand sanitizers because it's an alcohol-based company, which was really, really good. And after, things have eased down and imports are coming in and all that, I can see that this company is still producing. So this is an organization which has taken an advantage to look at itself, its operations, to see how best they can also evolve during this pandemic. And that is what we call thriving, because instead of shutting down their plant and sending people home, they've really thought through and reflected to see that, okay, this is the next line of action that we can take as a business. Also, leaders should ask how they will integrate additional workers in the future, what services might be added or changed as a result, and what other operations may be maintained in a remote capacity. As I'm sure in Kenya, here in Ghana as well, a lot of the face of organizations have changed. Now people are working from home, people are operating the hybrid system just to try and keep the number of people down within the organization. So during the thriving stage, it's also the time for organizations to look at their workforce in the future and what sort of services will suit their operations going forward. So thinking of these options will help the organizations redefine their workforce and set the direction to thrive in the aftermath of the crisis. It's essential that leaders have detailed blueprints of the new working landscape at this stage. They need to start envision it and also work towards it. As I said, the recovery process is not just something that would just happen one day. It's a journey and it's a process. And these are some of the things that leaders need to have the foresight to think about and then be doing in order to help their organizations to thrive, even though there are crises. You'd realize that some organizations have really taken advantage of this crisis. Some have shut down, some are still running, and it's amazing to find out that, okay, what did these organizations do to actually still be, thriving and doing what they are doing in this pandemic, even though some businesses have shut down. So thriving is very important, and it's better than just surviving, because in surviving, it would, not just take you back to where your business was, you just be hanging in the middle, and then it means that we're not going to have any proper progress for the business. I just wanted to share these highlights on what happens during a crisis stage, so that it sets the tone for what we need to do to adapt, in moving forward as an organization, and what leaders and HR can also do to help the organization to move forward. So once crisis happens, it's happened, and you can't run away from it. You need to embrace it. It's a new change. Change can be positive or it can be negative. So once a crisis happens, you need to embrace it. And in embracing it, it's about how do you face the new reality? How do you move forward as an organization? It's not just, simply returning to your old ways of business. It's not business as usual, because things have changed. You can't just be doing your old things. You can't just be, moving forward as if nothing has happened. You need to change and face reality and find better ways of managing your business. And this pandemic has created an imperative and an opportunity for organizations to re-engage with their workforce and reinvent their workplaces. All these remote working, hybrid working, it's a new way that organizations are reinventing the workplaces. Now, while many, in facing your reality, you realize that while many workforces have demonstrated resiliency, it's also important that we remember that transformative change can be difficult and unsettling for many workers. In facing this pandemic, for example, we have to put in place many measures. Do this, don't do that. And it's all change that people are not used to. So it can be very, very unsettling for people. While some may prefer working from home, others may be uncomfortable or unproductive outside of traditional work settings. And, leaders need to accommodate workers when it comes to this, and that is facing reality. I'll take myself as an example. When this happened in our organization, we decided that, okay, the engineers, they can't be away from the plant because they have to be here to produce. But for the supporting staff, we provided internet and modems for those that didn't have laptops as their normal working tool, because some people use desktops. We procured laptops for everyone, and then we said, stay home and then work from there. So for support, every support staff was offsite. But I realized that for myself, it wasn't really working because I have 4 children. Now they're all stuck home with me. I think my last baby at the time, he was about 1.5 years. So you can imagine, anytime I'm on a call, I'm on a Teams call, he wants to hop on, he's crying, he wants to sleep. It wasn't working for me. And I think at the time I realized that I was having a burnout. So I realized that, okay, if I'm feeling this way, then let me find out from my team how they are also coping with this at home. And we realized that it wasn't working for everyone. So we decided, okay, instead of, because most of the offices here are shared offices as well. So in trying to be flexible, we said that, okay, if an office has like 4 people, we'll rotate. Maybe 2 people can come in the 2 days, the other people can come in the 2 days. And you don't need to be walking around the plant so that, you'll be having contact with people so that we can minimize the spread, because it was really at the heat of the pandemic. And for myself, what I decided to do was also to come to the office, from morning till 2. And then I told my boss that after 2 p.m., I wasn't going to be able to join any calls. I'll respond to emails when I see them. So it's like after 2, I will not be available, only on emergencies. You can call me, but I would, because after that time, I've left the kids also at home with someone. I need to go and check on them. So it's a very difficult time. And that was the time that it's like the whole workplace is reinventing itself. And during that time, because it was unsettling, it was difficult, we had to find new ways of embracing our new reality. So despite the uncertainty, one thing that remains clear is that customers, workers, suppliers, and other partners are watching. They are watching how organizations are handling the recovery. And how an organization handles the recovery defines its brand, both their workforce and their customers. It establishes the company's reputation, because if you did not handle your workers well during the pandemic, or your customers well during the pandemic, that would ultimately define your brand. So facing reality is really, really important when you are operating an organization. And this also establishes whether an organization is operating as a social enterprise. Because previously, you know, a social enterprise has been seen merely as one that, you know, is only doing its core social responsibility for, you know, the places within which it's operating. But now that is changing, because if you are a true social enterprise, you would operating such that, you know, you are, in the broader sense, you are embedding more human-centered rewiring of the relationships that you have between you and also the society as a whole, you know, and providing a goal of providing stability in a world that is quickly changing. So becoming a social enterprise also is about much more corporate, you know, creating that balance of the concerns of the organization and those within the broader ecosystem. So the social enterprise of work offers organizational leaders a sustainable path for their workforce, the organization's DNA for the future by embedding 3 attributes into organizations for: 1, purpose, potential, and then also perspective. Okay, so organizations that embrace purpose embed well-being and meaning into every aspect of work. And they optimize the power of the individuals by harnessing the workers' complementary strengths in the service of a common goal. Also, any organization that embraces potential are designed and organized to maximize what humans are capable of thinking, creating, and doing in the world of machines, and increasing their people's potential for long-term success in the workplace. When you talk about perspective, you know, organizations that embrace perspective also view uncertainty as offering possibilities rather than threats, positioning themselves to take, you know, decisive actions to shape an unknown future. Because if you're an organization that embraces perspective, you don't see it as a negative event. It may be negative, but always see that in the negative, there is something positive for the organization to come out, because once you are able to come out of a crisis, you become stronger, you become better, and you shape a better future for your organization. Moving on, we'll look at some HR strategies or organizational strategies that can be deployed during the time of crisis. So I've outlined some 5 critical actions that can help organizations bridge the crisis response to the new normal by laying the foundation to thrive in the aftermath of the crisis. You notice that in every of my presentation, I keep saying thrive, because you need to thrive even in the midst of a crisis, because that makes you better and that shapes a better future for the organization. So what I've outlined is 1, reflection, recommitment, re-engagement, re-evaluation, overhauling, and realignment. Okay. What happens is that, or what I've observed, at least over the last 2 years, which has got me thinking, is that, you know, when it's crisis time, there's so much action going on that people don't have the time to sit down and breathe and look back and say, okay, what has happened? Where are we going? When is this going to end? So for me, during a recovery stage, I've realized that reflection is a key component for any organization to thrive. So one is that you need to create the time to reflect. And this is the key difference, in crisis response, because when there's a crisis response, you're just busy picking up the pieces and all that. But in recovery, you make the time and take the time to reflect on what's next. So for us as an organization as well, during our business continuity stage, for us, we are still in the business continuity stage. It's just that we are not at the red alert zone because the COVID is still around. So we are still managing our business continuity plan. What we do is that, or at the peak of the COVID, every single day, the business continuity management team, we were taking a call in the afternoon for about 2 hours. We were reviewing the day, what has happened, whether there were any events that happened that needs our attention to relook at our operations again. How are we moving forward? Is the plans that we have put in place, is it working? Do we need to change something? You realize that you may have a business continuity plan, but at the end of the day, it's not cast in iron because events keep changing. So you need to reflect, sit down and think, what next? What next? Because it's not static. Recovery is a process and you need to keep on going and then reviewing your process. Reflection may also be the most important first step and ongoing action in the recovery process, because it helps you to reflect on what has worked, what you have learned, and what you have missed in the responses. It also involves making the time to bring in different perspectives, different voices, and different leaders at different levels as inputs into charting what next. Because as I said, for example, having a business continuity committee is not just one person coming from HR. You have, depending on what your operations is, you have the HSSE person there. You probably have your operations manager there. You have your engineering manager there. I mean, I'm talking from our context and perspective. So it helps you to draw in different voices and also know how best, to help in the recovery process. So the recovery for workforce strategies, given the severity or the intensity and impact on workers, requires an informed and continuous reflection, because this whole process will not be easy and it will require deliberate action from leaders to make time for this to happen. For us also, at the time the coronavirus happened, we were in the middle of an outage. So we had a major breakdown at our plant and we were fixing it. So you can imagine the engineers in the middle of it, the CEO, everyone, and it was a very busy time for us at the plant. But we didn't say that, okay, we don't have enough time because we have to fix the plant. We have an obligation to the government to produce XYZ megawatts of power for them. So, we don't have enough time to reflect on this crisis and then see how it will affect our business. We deliberately made time to ensure that we are having meetings to reflect on the key areas of the business and how this pandemic can affect it and how we can move forward from it as well. It's key. So regardless of your operations and how much you want to make money, how much you want to meet your production targets, there's nothing wrong with stepping aside from the main role and having a very good reflection on what is going to work best for the business. So I think this is something that HR can lead. And as I said, even if it's not just HR, all managers have become HR in a certain way because we help HR to manage the organization. So we have different managers have become business partners. So you're going to help in doing this in the reflection process. It's good to step away, see what has worked and also what hasn't worked. The next strategy that I'll talk about is recommitment. So, as organizations begin the recovery process, they should reinforce their recommitment to well-being and purpose through a focus on physical, psychological, and financial concerns. You know, the physical well-being will include, emphasis on health and safety, cleanliness in the workplace, and availability of testing and treatment. You know, psychological well-being practices that can, be put into perspective is flexible schedules, that can help workers address their mental and emotional health. So for us as an organization, throughout the whole of the pandemic, what we did was that we provided sanitary items to the workforce. The company procured sanitary items like hand sanitizers, the face masks, and everything that you can think of that can help us manage the coronavirus properly. So we were providing that to workers on a constant basis. So for their personal use, and then some for homes as well, because as I've mentioned before, procuring these sanitary items became very difficult in the country because in the first instance, they were not available. So for us as an organization, we were recommitting to our workers and letting them know that we have their well-being at heart, such that we are providing them things beyond the workplace. Because if you are giving the worker the face mask at work and the sanitizer at work and they don't have some at home, remember they live with people in their households, and those people are also going out on the daily basis, and they are, they have contact with different people. So just trying to help minimize the spread, and also giving the workers a sense of, that the organization cares. What we were also doing is that we were having periodic testings. We wanted to arrange with the government, but with the government testing, it was difficult because they were not getting the reagents. And if you do the testing, the results were sometimes going to take a week. So we took further, steps to arrange with the Veterinary Services of Ghana. We definitely contracted them, paid them. We want you to test our workers on a bi-weekly basis. And this was not just for the workers. If you have any member in your household and you felt that the person was, exhibiting any kind of symptoms and you wanted them tested, we had these facilities available. And as I've mentioned before, for psychological well-being, we're also providing flexible schedules. We made our workers aware that if you're having any problems with your work schedule, just let us know so that, we can adjust to help you, because it was a critical period and everyone needed adjusting. There was no blueprint of how to operate the workplace. I think for myself, I think one time I had such a burnout, it was quite an emotional one for me, because I felt like I had been on, because every afternoon we were on the business continuity calls, checking in and all that. And I realized that, it was clashing with having the children at home. So at one time I spoke to my boss about it, and I said, what, the meetings are good, but I think that, it's happening at times when sometimes it's not suitable for me. So he said, you know what, Felicia, if at the scheduled certain time, it's not suitable for me, just let me know, give me your inputs, what you have done or in your area, the updates that you want for the committee to look at, I'll present it for you and I'll give you the feedback. And for me, that was a very good support, because now you are having to manage the COVID, manage your home, and then manage your normal workload as well. And this can be too much for any human being to handle. So, we need to create that flexibility in the workplace, and this involves recommitment. The organization recommitting itself to its workforce for them to know that they are there for them no matter what. It makes that whole difference. Leaders should also recognize the diversity of workers and individuals' expectations and support them through crisis, in the transition period. The commitment should extend to well-being at home, as workers continue to take care of children and elderly members. People are looking for meaning into their work, and it's not just about paying people to come to work, because if you're paying people to come to work and they don't have that sense that you have them at heart, it becomes difficult for the workers to commit and be committed to the job that they are doing. So if you want to win loyalty as an organization, this recommitment needs to be given to employees during the time of crisis. And I believe that this is something that HR can lead in any organization throughout the adaptation or the recovery period of any event that happens. Also, organizations should communicate directly with employees and teams in a timely manner to outline the organization's missions, its priorities, so that it connects business goals and outcome. The workforce must feel connected to the mission. As part of its efforts, organizations can assess, update, and implement essential policies and practices that promote well-being of both the off-site and then the on-site workforce. For the first time, I think, we didn't have any psychological assistance in place, but we realized that the pandemic created so much burnout for people because, there was a shift system. Some people were having to do double shifts and, a whole lot of burnout, and created that. So for us at that time, the pandemic birthed a psychological assistance program where we brought on board psychologists and counselors on board, so that if anybody was going through any difficulty emotionally at the time, they had access to the psychologists and then the counselors at the time to take them through whatever situation that they were going through. Now that the COVID is easing up and things have changed, we have improved on the psychological employee assistance program to include other things which were not originally in place. So this has birthed something new for the organization, and now the workers know that we have them at heart, and at every point in time we are thinking of them. The organization should also recognize that performance likely takes a new meaning in the post-COVID workplace. So health and productivity combined to help ensure workers thrive rather than simply deliver on objectives, because you always want the best from your workers. It's not just about delivering on their job descriptions. Everyone has so much more in them that they can contribute rather than just their job description. So recommitting to the workers ensures that you also get the best out of them. So you also need to ask ourselves as HR leaders, or any leader within the organization, how we'll provide support for workers and ensure workers feel connected and engaged with the redefined priorities and strategy of the organization. Because I believe that every crisis that happens redefines the strategy of the organization, because things are changing, things are new, and you are not in your old place. So definitely the strategy is changing. So you need to have a way to connect your employees to that strategy and the new priorities of the organization. And this can be done through the recommitment and showing that you care for them and helping them in every aspect of transitioning through the recovery phase. So the third thing that I'll look at is re-engagement. During the recovery process, it creates opportunity for organizations to redeploy their workforce and maximize their contribution and potential. Whilst employees return on site, others may continue to work remotely. Some will engage in a hybrid activity and remotely or whatever. Much of the time with team members for specific functions. So it's a time for re-engaging your workforce, finding the opportunities to ensure that you have the proper systems in place to help your employees throughout the recovery process. HR should also prepare workers with the skills and capabilities for their return. This includes providing them with the infrastructure and technology, such as the bandwidth and the tools for virtual work, as well as the critical knowledge, resources, and digital access they need to meet both immediate and future requirements. I think for us, I always use us as an example. You know, I think that this pandemic has really taught us, Taka in Ghana here, you know, a lot of skills, because, you know, I realized that most of our meetings were in person. And, you know, even though we had access to Microsoft Teams, we rarely made use of it. And so, you know, sometimes our site is quite big and most of the managers are located in different parts of the site. You know, just realize that you don't need to walk to the conference room for us to have a meeting, because we have this technology and we've left it lying there idle like that. So it's for me, it's giving us new skills, because some people had not been even using the Microsoft Teams. You know, they didn't even know how to navigate around it. I'm talking about the larger workforce, because now if I want to have an HR DEBA, I don't need to have everyone in the main big hall before I can have my HR DEBA. But now with the skills, we've had IT do virtual presentations on how to navigate around you know, the Teams, how people can access it on their phones. And these are building new skills and capabilities, because it's a skill that which was already there, but you know, they were not using it. So, you know, they didn't know how to use it, but this is the time that it has been deployed. As I also said, you know, for now also, we have provided the right technology to make people be able to work, you know, remotely and all that. Now, people have the bandwidth in the house. So if you have to meet any, you know, obligation and you felt like you didn't want to come to the office, you had the option to work from home, because now you have your laptop, you have the internet connectivity. So it becomes easier for you to work. I think that this COVID has really given a lot of flexibility. Now, let me chip in just one funny story. I have this friend, she went on maternity leave, and when it was time for her to come back to her organization, she actually had a premature baby. And this issue is actually something before the COVID time. When it was time for her to come back to work, she realized that the baby was not strong enough and she wasn't comfortable leaving the baby in a crèche. So she actually applied to her CEO for him to allow her to work from home, at least for the next 2 months, because her mom had traveled and will come after that to come and take care of the baby. Now her CEO said no. So she was forced to take the baby to the crèche and then come back home. When she returned to work, I think it was about 6 months down the line that, you know, COVID came in and their whole operation shut down. They had to go home and work from home. So she was sitting down reflecting, and I was there one evening and she called and she said, you know what? She feels like having a word with her CEO, because she felt she hadn't been treated well, you know, because her job is such that it didn't require her to really be in the office to be able to do what she did, you know, she needed to do. But at the time she needed it the most, the organization, you know, didn't provide it for her. Now here comes COVID. There's a lockdown and everyone is home, and she's still delivering on what she needs to deliver. So it was making her feel used. And so she was asking my perspective on it, whether she should talk to her manager about it. And then that's it. But then this is a clear example of where, you know, this crisis and then this pandemic has opened up our eyes to some of the things that we felt were not possible are now becoming possible, so that we are upskilling people to take opportunities within the organization. Now, talking about re-engagement also, re-engaging and redeploying the workforce will involve both assigning and creating meaningful and impactful opportunities for workers, but also engaging workers and teams to apply their potential and capabilities. You know, I don't know about you, but broadly in crisis response, individuals and teams are assigned to different roles than they originally do. So you would realize that in the business continuity or in responding to crisis, you probably have an HR officer being like a fire warden or a first aid person. And this shows that, in crisis response, we as individuals and teams can do more. So this is the time that organizations can re-engage their workforce, looking at the events that have happened and redeploying people, because you realize that maybe because of the crisis or a pandemic. I like to use crisis because I don't want to think that COVID is the only thing that can happen within the workplace. We need to think big, because there are a lot of things that can happen which can cause organizations to come to a standstill. So looking at the broader picture, you have to look at how you re-engage and redeploy workforce to involve them in the whole operations of the organization. Because today someone is an HR here, but you may realize that they have probably good skills in HSSE, health and safety, or they may have knowledge in other areas. So that is the time that you need to re-engage your workforce so that you can maximize their potential. That is the time that you need to re-engage people and make much good use of them. So given the ongoing challenges, workers will have family and personal concerns. I've talked about balancing it. So we should have a good balance so that people will have preferences for scheduling and flexibility with critical business needs as well. Because even in as much as there's a pandemic or there may be a crisis going on, you realize that there will be competing preferences, because the organization needs you, your home needs you, and you need yourself. So this is where you need to have the right balance, and organizations should create the platform for people to have the right mix and also create the right balance to also meet the business needs. Team leaders will be critical to the short-term success of re-engaging the workforce and driving business results. So reinforcing the role of teams and team leaders and redeploying workers to new teams and new roles will help foster a sense of agility and ultimately lasting resiliency. So it's very good that when you are re-engaging, you are also creating a business resilience, because what it means is that at every point in time, you have people to fill in for different roles or within the organization at every point in time, depending on the event that is also happening. Leaders should provide teams and managers and workers with clear direction on changes in work priorities and in routines, including new technologies and digital ways of working. This is a critical point of re-engaging and redeploying the workforce. So the recovery will require a shift in focus to new work priorities and new work routines, such as new schedules and combination of on-site and virtual work, which I've earlier spoken about. So how organizations prepare and support their workforce for these new routines will likely be a key driver of workforce performance, because employees like to be engaged. You cannot make rules in vacuum. You make a rule or a policy, you put it there, you don't engage people. The large success of your recovery state will involve engagement of your workforce and involving them in every aspect of the recovery process. This will be the key driver in worker performance and ensure that people have the sound mind to do the work that they are supposed to do in addition to dealing with the whole crisis. So the last thing that I'll be talking about is overhauling and realignment of workforce practices. It's very key. You know, the recovery process pertains directly to realigning the HR function and people operations, the most pressing business and workforce priorities. So the recovery process may not succeed if the HR function does not embrace a redefined role and one that anticipates and orchestrates the organization's new priorities. So as with the example I gave of my friend earlier on, it means that their organization need to overhaul and realign their workforce practices, because previously they may have viewed that, you know, you can't, only being at work means that you're actually doing the work, but you can still be remote and still be delivering. It is possible. It may not work for everyone, but then at least it has stood the test of time that it is still possible to have people being productive when they are working remotely. So in the midst of crisis, HR needs to have a big overhauling and realignment of workforce practices. It doesn't mean that you need to change your whole policies, but you need to reflect. Then again, I think I've spoken about reflection. This is all about reflection. You need to reflect, go back into your policies. What are we doing now? What were we doing pre-crisis time that will not fit the post-crisis or even the recovery period? So it's very essential that you have a reflection. And then once you have had a very good reflection, and this will set the tone for your overhauling process. So HR may also consider making people decisions locally rather than from a center of support, or a new workplace that involves around distributed leadership, power, and teams. So for example, you realize that in some organizations, it's not the same for my organization here, but in some companies, I know that, for example, some companies have maybe an operation in Ghana or maybe in another country, but their HR is probably based in their head office in maybe Europe or something like that. During this period, in adapting, then you have to think of having, you know, HR making decisions locally, because sometimes some decisions need to be made quicker rather than on a slow basis. So rather than supporting people from a rather remote area in terms of issues, it would be good to have a support system which is quite close or teams based. So for example, even if you don't have, you cannot create or recruit an HR person all of a sudden into the country. As I've already mentioned, and is also mentioned by Doc when he was doing the introduction, all managers are HR business partners, because ultimately you help in implementing the HR policies. You can have an interim manager standing in as the HR person for that entity, you know, at that point in time, so that it helps to speed up decisions rather than having to wait all the way. So, you know, other priorities may include agile learning, in which people are quickly taught how to use new tools in response to an unexpected change, such as widespread adoption of video conferencing technology during the COVID-19 period. So you don't have to wait until you meet people in person. Now, agile way of learning is that, you know, you've taught all your people how to use Microsoft Teams on their phones, on their laptops, or wherever they are, how to connect to video conferencing. That creates agility in the business, and this is one of the overhauling that HR needs to do. Also, in the workplace of the future, HR can become the voice in making bold decisions in the face of uncertainty. They can help integrate the workforce's need for individuality and belonging, and the business's needs for security and reinvention. So HR is a big voice when it comes to you know, crisis and the recovery phase. And I think it's something I've witnessed, and I think that it's something that we can do to help the business to thrive. The choice and policies adopted during the recovery are also an opportunity to make this shift towards purpose, potential, and perspective, which I gave some insights on it earlier on in the slide. So the choices and policies adopted during the recovery, becomes an opportunity to make this shift towards purpose, because you have to be intentional as an organization about the things you do for your stakeholders and in the wider ecosystem. And as I said, one of the major big policies that came on was the Employee Assistance Program, which has become something, it's evolving over time, and we are adding a lot of assistance programs to it, involving pension counseling, because it wasn't done before. But I think that now that we started that, we realized that, okay, we have people going on pension, we need to give them pre-pension counseling. Now in Ghana here, the pension is 60 years. So we've decided that, okay, from 55, we give them pension counseling in terms of how to manage your finances, preparing for pension. And these are things that have been birthed out of COVID happening, because we realized that we need to give employees the extra support that they need in order to thrive, for our businesses to thrive as well. Also, the choices that HR makes today will likely define its impact in the recovery and its role in the future. When employees and the broader workforce look back at this crisis and its aftermath, they should see that HR took a forward-looking perspective in its response, while balancing critical short-term workforce and business needs, and an opportunity to pivot the future. So HR has a big voice to play, or a big part to play in this whole recovery phase for a business. So the policies that you make today, it's something that people should look back and think that you have contributed something great to the business. So in conclusion, what are some of the takeaways? Some of the takeaways that I would like to give are that, the recovery from COVID-19 has given the human dimension of urgent workforce challenges, and the uncertainties facing business leaders require workforce strategies which focus on both short and long-term recovery, while reaching for the future and new normal by integrating the attributes of purpose, potential, and perspective. Also, short-term actions and long-term vision presents organizations with an opportunity to rapidly assess and evaluate their earlier workforce strategies and response priorities to reposition themselves to thrive in the new realities to come. Organizations may also be tempted to dismiss the need for change or imagine recovery as a return to recent past. It is not, because the organization, the face of operating an organization has changed. I don't think anyone will look back today and see their business the same as post-COVID time. The face of every business has changed, because every business is trying to find new ways to be resilient and how to thrive within, within the going forward. So any organization that refuses to realign itself and think that they are the same pre-COVID, I think they'll be making a big mistake. You need to have a mindset shift that things have changed, because if you don't have a mindset shift and you go back to your old way of doing things pre-COVID time, you realize that your competitors have taken advantage of the recovery to reimagine their workforce and their businesses, and also positioning themselves to thrive in the future. Also by anticipating and adopting good HR strategies in the context of future directed towards purpose, potential, and perspective, organizations can lead, prepare, and support their workforce through the recovery phase while positioning themselves for the next phase, and that is thriving in the new normal. You need to adopt good strategies. You need to reflect, have good strategies, and always look back on how we can propel the organization forward to thrive. Thank you. I hope it's been engaging for you. I hope it's not been boring. I hope I've been able to share some perspectives, and I think I can take some questions now, if any. I think I have one question here, which was forwarded to me from Tom. Maybe I'll address that now, and then if any other questions, we can look at it. So the first question that came in is that HR high flyers have rarely ascended to become CEOs. And if they have, very few. Could you please shed some light on this? Will it be a new trend in the future, given the excellent way HR professionals have handled employee issues during the COVID-19 period? I think this is an excellent question, that it's very few HR people that you have seen being made into CEOs, or having the opportunity to lead an organization. And I don't want to say that I would want to blame the HR, but I think that we also have a part to play, because from my experience, or from past interactions with people, you realize that some HR professionals are not agile. They are not involving themselves into the operations of the organization. They are not getting to know the business, because HR is a business partner. As an HR, you should know every aspect of the business, where the business is going. You should have the strategy at the back of your hand, because the HR strategy that you put in place is a support to the business. So if we are not becoming agile, I think that we are sidelining ourselves, because when it comes to the table and you need to make a contribution, you are not able to properly articulate yourself, because you don't have anything to share. So for me, I think that in the bigger picture, the HR not being more involving in the business is a part to play. And I think that if you show that you have potential, people would also give you the opportunity. I would use myself as an example. For my previous job in the oil and gas, I think that I was given the opportunity to become an acting general manager, and I was going to be made confirmed before I exited and came to TACA here. And that's because I'm a very hands-on person. I like to get involved in the business. At every point in time, I'm going to finance, I'm asking the questions. And we used to have a joint venture with Maersk Drilling, and they thought I was really involved in the business. So they felt comfortable, and they even made the recommendation to my CEO that this girl is good. Why don't you put her in this position? Because she has the capability to move the business forward. And that's because I was always asking the right questions. It's not about being in everyone's business, but you should have the business at the back of your hand, such that you should be able to even ask technical questions. I'll also use an example. When I was in the pharmaceutical industry, I think at that time, we were a distributor for ethical medicines. And some of the new staff that we recruited, sometimes they said they thought I was a pharmacist. Why? Because when they came for the interviews, some of the questions that I asked, I was asking them in-depth questions on, some of the pharmacology. And that's because I take my time to learn on, the things that we sell. I also engage with the pharmacist. If I don't understand any medicine or drug, sometimes I can take a leaflet, read through, and get to know it. So it's about getting to know the business. So I think that HR need to do more. If you want to be seen as someone who has a potential to become a CEO, don't shoot yourself in the foot. Be hands-on, involve yourself in the business. And that is how you can be seen and become visible in the business. I hope I've been able to shed some light on that. Now, the next question was, how has the function of HR performed in Ghana, giving specific examples in managing complex facets of COVID-19? Example, remote working, sickness, loss of jobs, loss of loved ones, mental health, back to office, and vaccination myths. I think that a lot has happened in the HR space during the COVID-19 period in Ghana here, because as I've mentioned earlier in my presentations, you know, there's no blueprint for COVID-19 because it just sprang up on all of us, and there's no template. You can go and have a look at it and say, okay, let me manage it this way. So I think that in the HR space, much of the thriving has been on knowledge sharing. So we have a very big HR platform. It's called the HR Africa Network, where, you know, there's about 500 of us on it. So people are asking questions. I don't know how to do this. Can you help me? How are you managing this within your organization? So it's been more of information sharing. And I think that, as I mentioned that in my presentation, that you need to also ask around and see what has worked for people and what hasn't worked for people as well. Also, now organizations are the myth that, you know, you need to be in an office space before you can be seen as being productive. I think that myth is highly debunked now, because people have shown themselves that, you know, they can perform. If you take my friend, for example, now, you know, COVID-19, she didn't have to prove her boss wrong. Something happened, COVID happened, and COVID had to prove to her boss that you can work and be successful without being in the office, and you can still be productive. So I think that given our African mentality, that has greatly been debunked. And I think that now also in the HR space or in the workforce stage, people have become now more very technological, because now technology is the way, and most learnings are becoming more online. For us as an organization, for example, I was very sad because during 2020, I would say that I couldn't even achieve 10% of my training plan, because most of the plan involved sending people outside the organization or even outside the country to go and do the training. Now, this is not possible. We have to get creative. And for us operating in a technical field like this, some of the trainings, it becomes very difficult because some of it is very demonstrative. So how do you become, you know, come up with new ways to also impart knowledge? Because the fact that COVID is there doesn't mean that learning has stopped. People still have to learn, people still have to acquire knowledge for the work that they do. So one of the things, as I said, through knowledge sharing, I realized that, you know, there's an organization that can give us a learning management system or a platform that can help with all, even solve up to 90% of all my technical trainings. So now I have a learning management system, which is preloaded with over 500 courses in the course catalog. So the leaders or the team leaders have an opportunity to choose from. So I think that COVID has really, you know, changed the face of HR and people management within the country as a whole. And I think I will say that it is for the best, because we are learning new things every day, and every organization is trying to find new and better ways of how it can work and succeed in these uncertain times. So those were the two questions. Okay, I don't know if I still have enough time to go through the chat section. I can see some questions typed there.
Thank you so much, Felicia Folitse. That was a great presentation. And I can assure you that members have really benefited. I think even some of the questions that came through, you have actually given the answers in your presentation, so there's even no need of asking further questions. It's a clear sign that indeed, I mean, you are an expert in this area. You've given us, the experiences across in terms of also how you've dealt also with some issues, just the whole crisis trajectory in the organization, the rebound, the thriving, recommitment, re-engagement. That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Felicia. We really appreciate that. So please grab a glass of water. I know you really, had it heavy this afternoon, but we really thank you for that. Without further ado, please allow me to invite Dr. Murithi Ndegwa for closing remarks. But just before Dr. Murithi comes on board, our next presentation, our next webinar will be on 28th of October. We'll be able to share with you the topic well in good time so that you can prepare to log in. But thank you so much. Over to you, Dr. Murithi.
All right. Now, maybe before I give my final remarks, I think there's a question I've seen on the chat. Maybe we might want to have Felicia to answer. Just one question on the chat. Is one I've seen. What's the question saying? It is a question I thought I saw on the chat.
This one, how can HR professionals change the negative perception?
Yes, I think that's the one. Yes, that's one.
Yes.
Maybe I think Felicia has taken the water, so now maybe she can answer that question as we wrap up.
Okay. Felicia, you got it? How can HR professionals change the negative perception in organizations by employees?
Okay, I think that, the question was, how can HR change the negative perception? I believe about our office and within the organization. This is a challenge, and this is one question that we've been highly debating on, I think, in the last 2 weeks between our platform, and people were sharing perspectives. But from my perspective, I feel that, as I said, HR has not been greatly involved in the business, and employees have seen that HR is just, HR can only be seen, when there's a disciplinary issue or an issue to be dealt with. I think we need to demonstrate that we are business partners, we are shareholders, and we are concerned with every aspect of the business. I think that HR also doesn't do enough education in terms of the policies within the organization, and making workers understand where HR really stands. I think that HR should also present itself as someone who is neither here nor there. I always say that as an HR, you are a wall. You are a wall between management and you are a wall between employees. So you are in no man's land. And I think that if you are an HR person, you have to be honest, you have to be candid. If at every point in time there's a decision that is going to be taken by management, which you feel that will not augur well for the workforce, you should be bold enough to speak so. And I think that people who are honest and speak into an organization, you earn respect, not just with the employees, but also with management as well, because they know that you are trying to create the balance. Because, for example, if management wants to take a decision and you don't advise them well because you're probably scared that, if you say it, you will lose your job or something. Tomorrow, if the management, let's say maybe it's a disciplinary issue and people have to go home and you didn't advise management well, if the people go home and they report you to the labor office, it is you that will be disgraced in the labor office because you'll be called to come and answer. And then management will come back and say, okay, why didn't you advise us properly to take the proper decision? And that's because you drowned your voice. You did not make your voice heard, and you did not speak, you were not bold enough to speak to management to let them know that this decision that they are taking is wrong. Likewise, for example, if employees are making demands which that the organization cannot meet, you are in a better position to explain to the employees, because if you if you are someone who involves his or herself in the business, you realize when the company can and cannot afford things. So you'll be in a better position to explain to the employee, so that, let's say if you're having negotiations, you can make a better and informed decisions. So I think HR really needs to put themselves out there, be bold, and speak into any actions that happen within the organization. Get involved in the business, get to know the business, because that is when you can make a very good contribution. So I think this is my submission on that.
All right, I think, thank you very much, Felicia. And we end with that call that if you want to learn how to swim, you've got to get into the water. And I think what you're saying is that as a HR practitioner, you've got to get your hands into the job. If you don't get yourself into it, then you certainly will not be making the right decisions. So ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you all very much for having logged in today, and to especially Felicia for the excellent discourse that you've given us.
Thank you.
I think I saw we're about 83. And so I want to thank all those who are able to log in today. So ladies and gentlemen, we want to very, very warmly thank Felicia Opoku for that excellent presentation. And let me just sample a few of the comments that came on the chat. Allow me just to do that. I've seen comments that were saying excellent presentation, time and effort. I've seen a comment that says very good presentation, great experience, very impactful, excellent and powerful. We agree with all these comments. You've done an excellent job. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, we give her the thumbs up, don't we? Thank you so very much, Felicia. We look forward to perhaps you coming again to tell us about experiences in Ghana, because I think all that we always say is that nobody has a monopoly of knowledge, and we keep cross-pollinating ideas from one marketplace to the other, so that we can all grow and become better managers, or better directors, or better whatever you may want to call it. But thank you so very much. Please pass our very warm regards to your colleagues in Ghana. If you also want us to give a discourse on any topic from a Kenyan perspective, as KIM, we are more than willing and ready to do that. So please do let us know. From the onset, again, also, we'd like to see how we can collaborate more. And I think Tom and the team will be contacting your team, so that we see how we can even share our knowledge and experiences a little bit more. And I'm sure we'll all be beneficial, and the two countries will stand to benefit. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Have a blessed evening, and bye for now.